about a time when you challenged yourself? Maybe you tried something you've never done before. Maybe something no one has ever done before. Most likely, you faced some problems along the way. For today's guest, that problem was
probably the moment we realized we got frostbite. Where we were at that point on the trail, we still had about a 2-day hike out just to get to a road. So you have a long time to think about what you've just done and what might happen.
Your problem probably wasn't very nice either. At least in the moment, it wasn't. But what about when everything's said and done? How we reflect on those problems?
You have to have those moments to be able to have something to compare to your more elated moments.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of MTNmeister. Today we welcome Shawn Forry. Hi, Shawn.
Hey, Ben. How's it going?
Things are good on the East Coast. You're on the West Coast, right? California?
Yeah, I'm just down the road here from Yosemite Valley.
Very cool. For the listeners who don't know Shawn, he may in fact be the most interesting man in the world. As an outward bound wilderness instructor, he takes both children and adults on backpacking and climbing expeditions. He also runs scenic interpretive tours during the winter with 10 dog sled teams. He's also a hiker. This past winter, he and Justin Lichter became the first people to ever through hike the Pacific Crest Trail in the winter. But before all of this, Shawn, I read at one point you managed high-end weddings for a catering company?
It's true. I've kind of been all over the spectrum of things I've found myself doing.
That just doesn't quite fit with the rest of the resume. Who are you?
Hey, it's all about long days and just putting in very detail-oriented tasks on a daily basis. They're all transferable.
So it's the same.
Yep, exactly.
So I read you grew up in Amish country?
It's true, yeah. I grew up just across the river from Lancaster County in Pennsylvania, so in a little town called York. And I kind of grew up just seeing Amish communities on a daily basis, and I think that simplicity of life was ingrained in me pretty early, and something I really appreciate and value of being around that culture growing up.
I'm from southwestern Pennsylvania, so not far.
Okay. Yeah. So are you familiar with it?
Yeah, absolutely. How did you get into the catering company? This is I was just very surprised to see that.
It was one of the first jobs I've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And as with most jobs, a friend of mine recommended me to start, and I was 15, 16 years old, and I just stuck with it. And I think having a job where your best friend is there as well is both a motivation to stay there and just something I really enjoyed. The long days, and just I feel like I had many roles to fill there, and eventually got to the point of just kind of managing weddings and all kinds of high-end events. It was a unique first job, and I'm glad I had those experiences growing up. Yeah,
hard worker. But I guess at one point during a ritzy wedding, you just said, like, I need a career transition?
Well, yeah, I had a lot of things going on at that point in my life. I was playing music pretty consistently, and so I was traveling around a lot with that. And I think that's kind of where I got the travel bug, and being able to wake up in a new place every day, doing like little tours and stuff. And eventually I heard about the Appalachian Trail, and it was kind of downhill from there, or uphill, depending on how you look at it.
You mentioned they're working with your best friend. I wanted to talk a little bit about Justin Lichter, who you hiked the Pacific Crest Trail with, and I assume you've done some other hiking with him too. You didn't just jump in to the PCT, right?
Yeah, correct. So we actually met on the Pacific Crest Trail in 2004. That was our first year that we both hiked it, and we hiked it completely independently and didn't actually meet each other until about 200 miles from the end. And I think one of the unique things about friendships along any long distance trail is that there's almost an instant bond or instant connection with the people that you meet. And I think those friendships can become lifelong endeavors. And we actually only hiked together maybe a day in 2004. But we managed to keep in touch. And then Justin was out on a year-long hike 2 years later, and he was coming through Pennsylvania So he was looking, for a place to get out of the weather. He was coming through in winter at that point. So we met up and reconnected. And then later that summer, I was on the Continental Divide Trail myself, and he was out there as well. So we ended up finishing together on that trail. And he was out for a year long. He did the Appalachian Trail and PCT and Continental Divide in a year. So it's cool to see him finish something that he put a lot of time and effort into. And it just got us talking about future ambitions and future trips. And since then, we've done probably some of our harder trips together.
From the interviews that I read online, it seems like you guys are really different. You have different personalities. Do I have that right?
We're same in many ways, and I think different in maybe as small key areas. And I think the way we approach problems and decisions, and I think hard times are very similar. And I think what makes our relationship work really well. Justin's definitely a little more timid and more reserved and shy at times, and I can be a little bit more outgoing and I guess the more vocal of the two. But beyond that, I think it's a really good pair of why we've been able to succeed in some of the trips that we've done together now.
Yeah, it's funny. So I do the research beforehand on you guys, and seriously, in the interviews, the written interviews online, it's Justin's question, the answer is a couple of lines long, and then your answer is a full paragraph.
Yeah. Well, I've known Justin for over 10 years now, and I'm still prying to get information out of him, even around the comfort of friends and family. It can be pulling teeth sometimes.
That's funny. So his trail name is Trauma, which is an interesting fit for a timid guy like him. Do you know how he got the trail name Trauma?
Yeah, I do. So he was part of an outdoor rec organization with his college. He went to UC Santa Barbara, and they did a trip out to Utah, and it was a base camp model, 10-day or 2-week trip. And that was one of his first experiences outdoors. And just along that trip, he had a lot of traumatic experiences, kind of serendipitously, they ran out of food, so he found these old MREs just kind of buried in the sand out there and decided to eat them. And I guess one of them was it was a fortified cheese MRE that was more green than orange at that point. He got dive bombed by some ravens. So just a lot of just strange things that seem to be focused on him and none of the other participants that trip.
That's good. Now, how about yours, Pepper?
Well, it comes back to being from York, Pennsylvania. I got the name on the Appalachian Trail, and that was my first long hike. And part of that routine of just getting into the hike is you start meeting a lot of people and introducing yourself. And it was uncanny. It seemed like every time I told people I was from York, they thought I said New York. And that can get a little frustrating. So just one time I said, no, York, like the peppermint patty. And that's all it takes to get stuck with
get a trail name.
Trail name for 15 years now.
I was talking to Colin Arisman, who thru hiked the PCT a couple of years ago, and I found that his trail name was Miracle Zen. So I asked him how he got it, but he said it wasn't appropriate for the podcast.
Yeah, there's a lot of amazing trail names out there.
I was about to try to give myself a trail name, but I heard that that's a no-no.
It's better to be dubbed something you kind of have to live with.
Yeah. So let's move on to the thru hike during the winter of the PCT. This was very, very revolutionary. I don't think I realized how revolutionary it was until really started looking into this. Obviously nobody's done it before. Has anyone attempted it before?
From our research, and we actually didn't find this out until after we started, but there was a couple in the 80s apparently that attempted it. They were going northbound. I don't have their names off the top of my head. They got about 300 miles in and ultimately met their demise on I guess they had some icy conditions and went down a ravine.
Oh, wow. It might have been good that you didn't know that before you went
Yeah, well, we found out maybe a day before. We were in transit to the trail. we're like, okay, that kind of put more of a reality on what we were about to attempt.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they went northbound. You went southbound, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And so what time did you start? What time of the year? And was it even an option to you to go northbound, or was southbound kind of the way to go?
Well, the direction we were going to travel was probably the thing we debated the most. We've been planning this trip for probably over 5 years, and every time we looked at it, it was hard to decide what was going to be in our favor the most. And even just defining what is a winter trip, what's the time frame for that? Because you're going to be on different parts of the trail at different times of the year. So we wanted to pay as much tribute to the idea of winter as possible, and not try and cheat things. So the way we looked at it is we wanted to start after all the northbounders finished. And we wanted to try and finish before any of the northbounders start. So in theory, we'd be the only ones out there for the entire season. So we started at the kind of the middle or tail end of the fall. So it was late October. It was October 21st that we started. And we actually flipped to southbound the week prior to starting. That's how long we were debating which direction to go. And a lot of those reasons were, both Justin and I are really familiar with the Sierras. We spent a lot of time there personally. That's where I work with Outward Bound. And so it just felt like a little bit of more familiarity and comfort, knowing we were heading deeper into winter and deeper into places that we were more familiar with. Mm-hmm. And if we could get through that final hurdle of the High Sierra, we knew we'd have some easier desert miles to finish out the trip.
Right. Is that how it played out?
Yeah, it did actually. And all along with this trip, we knew that there were so many things that would have to line up in our favor. You're working through the transition of fall to winter to spring. So really trying to set yourself up with where to be in the best place at the best time. And, we wanted to be out of Washington before the avalanche danger got too high. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to try and time the High Sierras with when it's historically a drier spell in the Sierras. So the last 7 out of 9 winters, it's been dry Januaries. And that's what we were really pushing for, is getting to the High Sierra by January.
So it sounds like you had some expectations going into this. We've talked about expectations on the show before, and how it can change how you actually feel about the outcome. Going into this, would you say that you had high expectations or low expectations? Or I guess even no expectations is sometimes the route that I like to take.
Yeah. It's a good question. I feel like we had optimistic expectations. Okay. And, I've jokingly said we have about a 17% chance of doing this at the start. And those odds increased as we went along, but we were totally comfortable knowing that it might take multiple attempts to try and pull this off. And I think going in with that rationale and mentality didn't put a lot of pressure on us to make poor decisions along the way. There wasn't that time-bound element of we have to do this right now in this moment. I'm sure that can be a motivating piece. But in terms of making logical and educational decisions that were fact-based, we were able to take the time element a little bit out of the equation.
Interesting. So 17% at the beginning, maybe jokingly, but was there a time on the trail when that was like a 0.01% chance? It's just like a really low point where you're like, I don't know if we can do this. Probably
the moment we realized we got frostbite. We were in northern Oregon, just south of Mount Hood at that point. And having worked in Minnesota in the winters, I'm pretty accustomed to seeing cold injuries and frost nip and frostbite. And I know how long that can take to heal. I know how long it can take to see how severe it is. Where we were at that point on the trail, we just got a 2-foot dump, and it was record-setting lows. And we still had about a 2-day hike out just to get to a road. So you have a long time to think about what you've just done and what might happen before you even get to a safe place. And I remember we finally got out to a road, and we're sitting in a diner getting a meal and just kind of having that discussion, like this could be the end. And we we had our shoes off under the dining, the dinner table there, and just kind of feet just throbbing and still a little bit numb, and just that was probably our point in the trip where things weren't looking the most grim in terms of being able to continue on.
Ooh. So here's an interesting question. Like, when you reflect on that time, there's like some psychology out there that says that humans have a difficult time like really remembering bad feelings unless we're talking about something really severe. Do you reflect on that time very negatively, or is it just kind of like something that you remember? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's for me, it's not like a negative thing or a positive thing. I think collectively it's just all part of the experience, and you have to have those moments to be able to have something to compare to maybe your higher moments or your more elated moments. Mm-hmm. And just to be able to sit there and I think be honest with yourselves on what the situation is. I think that was a critical piece with how we approached a lot of the decision making along the trip.
More MTNmeister with Shawn Forry coming up in a bit. But first, let's thank a sponsor of ours and tell you about the great deal that they're offering you. We are supported by the DeLorme InReach Explorer. It's the world's only satellite communicator with built-in navigation. With the InReach Explorer, you can send and receive messages, plan routes, drop waypoints, and share your journey from anywhere in the world, literally anywhere in the world. But its other features are what makes the InReach not only that navigation device, but also a survival kit. During emergency situations, you can trigger an SOS and interact with DeLorme's 24/7 search and rescue monitoring center. For $35 off of your purchase, go to inreachdelorme.com and use the code Meister, MEISTER, at checkout. And now, back to the show. Now, what about a high point on the trip? What were some of the things that you really reflect positively on, besides probably the entire experience?
Yeah. I mean, going a month straight in Washington and just having the sun come out for the first time was a huge morale booster when we were that early into the trip. That stands out. And I think collectively, just the experience of solitude out on the trip, you don't really realize how remote you are or how by yourselves you are until you're around other people. And I think having this month to adjust off the trail and be around people more often kind of puts the trip into perspective of just, I mean, we didn't see anybody out there for 1,700 miles.
You didn't see anybody?
We didn't see anybody.
Oh my God. I thought you would have like run into somebody for the first 1,700.
Yeah. It's nobody on trail. I mean, we obviously are going into town getting supplies and stuff, but I thought for sure we'd see at least more tracks in the snow. We saw a couple once you got closer to some trailheads, but just that moment of seeing somebody for the first time on trail, it wasn't until we're in the Southern California desert of, there's another hiker out here.
Oh my God. That's amazing. So I said I'm from southwestern PA. I grew up on a farm, and it's funny because I do a lot of running where I live now in Boston. And when I go home, I'll go running. And sometimes I'll go for, like a 5-mile run and not see any cars at all. And I think that's really weird to not see anybody for 1,700 miles of walking. Wow. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. And you don't realize how that it's happening until you actually meet somebody. Mm-hmm. You're just kind of in the moment. It just becomes normal. Right.
Yeah. For me, it was like you see a car go by and you're like, wow, I haven't seen any cars yet.
Yeah.
That's funny. So this is definitely a cliche question, but have to ask it. What did you feel like when you finally finished?
In my mind, there's almost 2 finishing points for the trip. Probably our highest high of the whole trip was getting over Forster Pass. It's in the Southern Sierra. It's the highest point along the PCT, and it's a pass that is shrouded in a lot of mysteries. Even northbound hikers are always asking questions about it. There's just a really steep couloir that you have to ascend northbound, or for us descend. So we were skiing off of it, and it was the literal final hurdle for us in the whole trip. So we were getting over that pass on a kind of whiteout day, and earlier in the day I fell into a creek, and having wet ski boots is not the best approach to going over a high pass. And it was just this moment of just doubt that we didn't know what we were going to see when we got to the top. There's always a notorious cornice that hangs over that pass. So you're just going, not knowing what you're going to see, and not knowing what your game plan is fully going to be until you have all the information in front of you. And just skiing off of that pass and getting to the bottom was, for me, the end of the challenge of the trip, and probably when I felt most elated. I think in that moment we realized we're going to pull this off. There's nothing that we're going to see south of here that we haven't seen already, or is going to stop us at this point. And I think mentally knowing that we did it, but we still have 700 miles of desert hiking to go, was a little bit of an unexpected challenge throughout the trip. But to finally get there and at the southern terminus, and especially having a lot of trail friends and my family there, was a huge moment of just relief and elation. And I think just to be able to share that with people that I love and care about was a really special moment, especially when we haven't seen anybody for so long. Yeah.
So it's been how many days, or I guess months now, since you finished?
Yeah, it's about 5 weeks ago. We finished on March 1st.
Cool. And how has it been coming back? Are you all recovered?
I would say I'm all recovered, and thankfully this isn't my first long trip and long experience away from my other life. Coming back from the Appalachian Trail, the first time I did it in 2003, that was a huge adjustment period, and I think mentally it took me a long time to figure out how to adjust back to the normal life. But those transitions have become a lot easier, and I think just applying the lessons I learned on the trail to my normal life really helped ease that transition. And for me, just staying busy really helps.
You said the lessons. What kind of lessons do you take?
Oh, I think the biggest challenge when someone comes back from an experience of backpacking for many days on end, you live such a simple life that when you get back to society, you see how frivolous people live, or how minute problems are a big deal for people. And just being surrounded by that, of people being frustrated in the grocery store line, or everything's a big deal. I think just being able to live a simple life and essentially live out of a backpack when you're at home continues to carry that thread of those themes of simplicity throughout your life, and it just becomes easy to go from one wilderness setting to an urban setting and back and forth.
So you have a whole spreadsheet of the gear that you used on your website. I really enjoyed looking through that. The job that I had before this one required a lot of looking at Excel spreadsheets, so it was a little nostalgic. Let's see, you have the weight of each item on there, and then you also have comments of what you thought of the gear, or why you used it before the trip, and then how it performed after. I think you have at least 100 pieces of gear on there. I'll have the link to it on your Meister profile page. So we talk about gear on this show by getting a recommendation from you, our Meister. If you had to suggest one or two pieces of gear for our listeners, try to make them unique or fun if you'd like, or just something that you're so passionate about, what would you recommend?
It's a great question, and I think the single most thing that boosted our spirits at the end of the day was just our entire sleep system. There were a lot of things that people don't think about winters, that you only have about 10 hours of daylight. So we spent a lot of time in our tarp, in our sleeping bags, and just being able to recover at the end of the day was a huge piece of morale and recovery for us. So the systems we were using we used a 2-bag system for our sleep system. So we had a down inner bag, and I'm a huge fan of quilts. So I was using a Katabatic Palisades quilt. It's a 30-degree down bag. And over top of that, I had a Mountain Laurels Design Spirit quilt, which is a synthetic bag. So that combination is a perfect balance of lightweight and being able to manage the moisture of a winter environment. And we were sleeping on a Thermarest X-Therm Neo Air, which has an amazing R value for how light and thin it is. So just being able to crawl into that warm cocoon at the end of the day was a huge piece of serenity.
It sounds fantastic. It's
Yeah.
it's early April in Boston, but for some reason it snowed yesterday. So
Yeah.
a good sleep system sounds nice to me. You can find, for the listeners, you can find those pieces of gear on Shawn's Meister profile page on our website, MTNmeister.com. Now, this is a question that I don't think I have ever asked, but since you're such a gear guru, I'm wondering if there are any pieces of gear where you would say, never, ever use that, like a piece of gear that you despise.
Well, I would say there's definitely some learnings in gear. A lot of the gear we were looking for, no one really caters to the type of trip we were doing, especially in the realm of ski gear. So there's definitely some inherent flaws with the ski gear we use. There's nothing I would say I would ever use again. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest learning was not using carbon fiber trekking poles in the winter. I think both Justin and I probably broke 5 or 6 different sections of those poles. And wow. I think just the carbon gets a little bit brittle when it's cold, and you're just dealing with more forces in the winter with, pole holing through snow. So there was a lot of days where I specifically was breaking a lot of poles and getting pretty frustrated and actually just breaking them. I had this Bo Jackson moment of just breaking poles over my knee and chucking them in a tree and then realizing, now I got to climb the tree to get those out. So I don't wish that frustration upon anybody.
Russell, who used to host this podcast, had an infatuation for carbon fiber. Russell, I'm sure you're listening to this right now. Don't use carbon fiber in the winter, no matter how much you love it. So is there going to be a film created about this? I know you have a lot of films on Vimeo and such about your other trips. I assume there's going to be a film about this?
Justin and myself didn't take a lot of video footage throughout the trip, but we've been partnering with a gentleman named Brent, who is just doing a personal documentary piece. Cool. On the trip for us. So Brent Yance, he's should be coming out with something by the end of the month. I think he's hoping to release that, on some of the Mountain Festival film tours. Cool.
Look forward to that. On these videos that you create, you do a lot of talking to the camera, and even on the solo expeditions, you're you turn it around and you talk to the camera, as do many hikers. You do a really good job of it, I have to say. It kind of reminds me of me trying to talk into the microphone by myself. It's got to be weird, isn't it? Like turning the video camera around on you. Do you get used to that?
At times, like you're moving and through landscapes, and you're having your own internal dialogue and having thoughts. And for me, it's just a matter of articulating that to myself, really out loud. A lot of these trips, it's either myself or Justin might be along, and so you feel that that privacy or that comfort. It's just you out there, and you're already thinking about these things, so you're just articulating it to the camera, and the camera's just capturing it.
That's actually really hard to do, though. I feel like when I go running, I have like these really intricate thoughts that I'm like, wow, I'm a genius, and then when I try to like articulate what I think, it just doesn't work out. Do you run into that?
Oh yeah, I feel like a babbling idiot when I talk, but it's like prose of Beethoven in my head.
Right.
That's really good.
Exactly. And it's also hard to talk when you're not talking to anybody else. Like when I do these other recordings, when I'm not talking to you, I still have to do some recording for the podcast. And I don't think that people realize, and I don't realize when I listen to podcasts, that most of the time the person narrating is literally just talking in a room by themselves.
Right. That's not weird at all.
Right. The other day I tried this. I was getting really frustrated with myself, and I just didn't sound natural, I thought. It sounded like either I was reading off of something or it just didn't sound like the way a person would talk. So I tried to like envision myself talking to somebody, and that didn't work. So finally I turned on the webcam on my computer, and I looked at myself and tried to have a conversation with myself as if I was talking to somebody. It was a weird day.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Anyway, Shawn, thank you so much for spending the time with us. For the listeners, you can find out more about Shawn at Shawn Forry, ShawnForry.com. You can see highlights, pictures, a quote from Shawn on his Meister profile page on our website, MTNmeister.com. Before we let you go, Shawn, we want to hear who you'd like to hear next on Mountain Meister.
There is definitely a lot of women in the outdoor long-distance hiking community at the moment that are doing some really impressive things. Mm-hmm. And I am personally impressed by a woman named Kristen Gates. She was one of the first women to go solo across the Brooks Range in Alaska a few years ago, and just this past year did a solo Yukon paddle down the Yukon. So she's definitely spent a lot of time by herself, and I think will have a unique perspective on what it's like to be by yourself, be a woman, and I think she's in her early 20s. So a lot of people doubted our abilities, and I feel a lot of privilege as a white man, where it's a little bit more accepted to push boundaries like this. But I think a woman like Kristen probably deals with that more on a daily basis, of people doubting her or saying that you shouldn't be out there doing those types of things.
What a great topic of conversation. For the listeners, keep an ear out for Kristen on a future episode of Mountain Meister. Shawn, I have to ask, I've heard some birds chirping. Are you outside, or are the birds just that loud? It adds so much character to the interview.
There's a single pane window in front of me.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
It's probably our listeners who are driving to work or wherever they're listening are probably having such a peaceful time listening to us.
Great.
Thank you, Shawn.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Shawn Forry, ex-high-end wedding manager, current long-distance hiker, and first person to through hike the Pacific Crest Trail in the winter. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget that you can get $35 off of your purchase of an InReach Explorer at inreachdelorme.com using the code Meister at checkout. We know that getting away from it all is great as long as you make it back. With the DeLorme InReach Explorer's tracking functions and its ability to trigger an interactive SOS, you can do that. Enjoy the rest of your day or your night, depending on when you listen. I'm the host of this podcast, Ben Shank.